Hey, everybody out there in the digital frontier, living on the cyber-physical boundary. Some call it the figital space, that space where the human condition meets technological capabilities. Welcome to the Digital Cowboy Roundup, where we explore that space together. In a previous article, I provide evidence that the fog of technology change is creating a critical inflection point for society. I identified that the large group of digital strugglers is growing. Digital strugglers make up 40 to 60% of all companies and, while enthusiastic about adopting emerging technologies, they are confidently failing.
This is a decades-old problem and largely the result of companies playing whack-a-mole with the symptoms instead of addressing the issue holistically. Looking at the cloud computing evolution, you can see the same pattern. Energetic early adoption by digital leaders who quickly figured it out, and followed by enthusiastic adoption by digital strugglers who failed to successfully adapt. Now, after 15 years of evolution, we see over 90% adoption of the cloud computing among digital companies, but we still see large swaths of companies who are not seeing a consistent positive return on their investment. I'll post up an article in the next few weeks with the cloud computing data, but that leads us to the question, with decades of guidance and time to get this right, why does it still happen? There is very strong evidence that executives are getting bad guidance with respect to emerging technologies and the reality of their company's capabilities versus intent. And it's really not their fault, other than not performing due diligence. There are plenty of examples where the success of digital leaders could be misapplied by digital strugglers to their detriment. A KPMG study called KPMG Global Tech Report 2023 reported that 63% of respondents agreed that their AI and automation efforts had positively impacted profitability or performance in the prior 24 months. That same report states that only 26% of businesses have seen profitability or performance of at least 11% from their AI and automation efforts. Those are the digital leaders. The juxtaposition is the same in study after study. BCG's October 2024 study, Where's the Value in AI?, reported that digital leaders were seeing reasonable ROI, but only 4%, the leaders of the digital leaders, were seeing in significant returns at scale. 74% continue to not see any success creating value. So if I tell my CEO the first part, that companies are succeeding, but I leave out the second part, it's a small fraction of all companies, what is he or she going to think? And even if I include the second part, but lean into the optimism, what happens then? After all, nobody wants to admit that they're below average, right? The issue is that 40 to 60% of companies, the digital strugglers, are in fact continuing to struggle adapting to emerging technologies and realize significant value from the investments, and that group has been large and consistent for decades. So everyone goes in with the best intentions, but we've seen for decades that delivering on those intentions is much tougher than most companies can muster.
You can't go long on social media without seeing a statistic-laden post that most companies are not achieving their expected returns on AI initiatives, including myself. Or conversely, that a few companies are knocking it out of the park. The reality, though, is that too many are falling behind. It's been the same with every emerging, maturing technology during my career of 40 years, albeit social media has brought sides to white-hot fervor for the last couple of decades. Sadly, both sides are often at least partially correct. One of the problems is that many companies are not measuring, nor even attempting to capture, holistic value. There is a gap between the promised value and the actual value achieved. Most companies are driven by the typical ROI model of revenue, cost, gains across strictly financial dimensions. This is largely because it's driven based on time and budget. That's a necessary perspective, but it's far from complete. Unlike traditional investments, AI initiatives unfold over time. They require iterative improvements, strong long-term adoption strategies, and the patience to track both realized and trending value capture metrics, not just traditional ROI. This is the same as for the broad topic of digital transformation. There's a critical paradox. There's what strategic ROI requires, and then there's what the organization can actually tolerate. Strategic ROI requires 3 to 5 years to materialize, but most organizations only have 12 to 18 months of patience. Strategic ROI requires cultural transformation. What organizations tolerate is quarterly results pressure. What strategic ROI requires is long-term capability building. And what organizations can tolerate is annual budget cycles. Strategic ROI requires that companies expect most to fail, with a few big winners. What organizations actually tolerate is every project must succeed. And then finally, what strategic ROI requires is strategic portfolio approach. But most organizations want to perform an individual project ROI. This explains the 28% value capture rate for the majority of companies, the digital strugglers. The flow typically goes something like this. First, invest in strategic initiatives. That's at Tier 3. Second, measure with Tier 1 metrics, expecting immediate financial results. Third, lose patience at 12 to 18 months. Then fourth, kill projects before strategic value materializes. And finally, capture only 28% of value. That's the quick financial wins. The majority of companies are breaking even or losing money on AI initiatives. This is unfortunate as many were caught out because they did not focus on the right strategic aspects. This is putting at risk the shift to human AI collaboration, collaborative AI. Companies need to take the wheel and own the conversation about value creation from AI. Playtime's over. It's time the adults took back control and told the tech providers what they want, by when, and what they are willing to pay in order to deliver returns. So how do we fix this value capture gap? Companies need to develop strategic AI roadmaps, prioritizing implementations that maximize human AI collaboration rather than focusing solely on cost reduction, efficiencies, and other traditional ROI metrics. This is strategic. This is where pivotal tech leaders come in. Pivotal tech leaders need to get engaged here and help executives and stakeholders align AI initiatives with the big picture business strategy. There needs to be a tiered value capture approach that retains discipline but allows strategic return. The approach must do 5 things. It needs to acknowledge reality. Strategic ROI takes 3 to 5 years, not a year to 18 months. Second, we need to require leading indicators. They need to be visible at 12 months or you kill the project. Number 3, use a portfolio approach. Not every project must succeed. 4, separate governance. Strategic initiatives need different funding and review. Lastly, build structural discipline. Provide options thinking, stage gate funding. What is needed is a value capture approach that allows for holistic value capture over time. The required value capture approach has 3 tiers. The first is financial, second is capability, and the third is strategic. Each tier has a different value percentage weighting. Each tier also has a realistic timeline. The first tier is a financial tier with a value percentage weighting of about 30%. Now this is a general kind of rule of thumb. Every organization will probably determine their own weighting. Value capture for the financial tier should be expected within 6 to 18 months. Organizations must have standard ROI discipline to make this tier. The second tier is a capability tier. Generally rule of thumb about 25% weighted value. Realistic timeline for capability tier is 18 to 36 months, and organizations must have change management patience. The third tier is the strategic tier, where the greatest amount of value is waiting to be captured, typically around 45%. The realistic timeline of this tier is 36 to 60 months. It's rare for organizations to have the institutional discipline, but that's what's needed at this tier. This approach directly addresses issues with the actual versus promise gap by measuring what matters. 3 tiers, not just financial ROI. Also tracking the gap explicitly, the promise versus captured every quarter. As well, enabling early intervention. Red flag thresholds trigger action. There's also addressing de-skilling. Tier 2 ensures capability preservation. And lastly, capturing long-term value. The third tier prevents premature initiative termination. This approach helps companies move confidently from the current 28% value capture rate to a target of 70-80% by ensuring they measure comprehensively, not just cost saves, tracking continuously, not just at launch, adapting dynamically, not just set and forget, and preserving human capital, not just maximizing automation. Without these structural changes, companies will continue killing projects at 12 to 18 months, capturing only Tier 1 value, the financial 20 to 30% of the total value available, missing Tier 3 value completely. That's the strategic 30 to 45% of value. There are some critical actions that companies need to take to achieve this. First is there needs to be a shift from AI for automation to AI for augmentation. Second, we need to calculate the total cost of collaboration, not just the deployment costs. We need to measure value capture rates continuously, and we need to build business cases on collaboration effectiveness, not just use cases and scenarios. Now, obviously, every company and every industry is different, but let me lay out some kind of projected timelines. For companies who start this strategic reset now, we should expect to see investment approach overhauls in 2026, followed by new ROI models operationally being available in 2026-2027 timeframe. The reality is that currently only about 15 to 20% of organizations have the discipline for this. Those tend to be the digital leaders. The digital strugglers need to get on board and not just follow the breadcrumbs left by the digital leaders. If you hung with me on this value capture reframe and have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll be posting an article with this and more of the reframe later this week. And be sure to follow me on LinkedIn. Until next time, be pivotal.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience and their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today.
Hi, I'm Chris Gethard, and I'm very excited to tell you about Beautiful Anonymous, a podcast where I talk to random people on the phone. I tweet out a phone number, thousands of people try to call. Talk to one of them, they stay anonymous, I can't hang up, that's all the rules. I never know what's going to happen. We get serious ones. I've talked with meth dealers on their way to prison. I've talked to people who survived mass shootings. Crazy funny ones. I talked to a guy with a goose laugh, somebody who dresses up as a pirate on the weekends. I never know what's going to happen. It's a great show. Subscribe today, Beautiful Anonymous.